Guys, it's Tina Lagasse here from Primitive Designs, and today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable little bunny. Now he's meant to be shown from this backside, so there's not much to his front, and he's meant to kind of like be perched in a window, on a shelf or something, and just a really simple, quirky little bunny full of character for your spring decor. So I'm going to take you through the pattern. The pattern, you can access the link to download below this video in the description. And that will take you to my website where you can purchase and download it. Since I'm making several of these because I'm just going to sell them in my store and also at markets this spring, I've gone ahead and made cardboard tracers. So you've got the bunny and then you've got the ear. And on the bunny, you'll notice that there is this line here. And that is, well, I've got them glued in place, but that's where actually you're stuffing. Because I didn't want to have any exposed hand stitching on this. And the shape it's got so much kind of curve to it that I didn't want to mess up the curve line by adding in a stuffing area. And I didn't want to do it at the bottom because this guy is stuffed with rice. So I had to be up at the top. So that's what that line is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace this onto a double layer of muslin or whatever your preferred fabric is. You could do a pattern fabric, but I would stick with a cotton. And I'm going to go in here. And I made 2 little marks. And I'm just going to draw on that line. Now, keep in mind, this is your sewing line. So this is one of those patterns where the curvature is really important to maintain in order to get a really nice looking body at the very end. So I am going to pin this and then I'm going to cut it out, but I'm going to give myself lots of room around. Okay. And I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew all the way around here so that there is no opening left open. And then afterwards, we're going to cut this line through the single layer. Okay, so you can see that I have now sewn all the way around. And I'm just going to take these pins out. And now I'm going to cut around, leaving approximately 1/4 inch all the way around for seam allowance. And on this particular pattern, I do not find it necessary to clip the curves. I haven't had any issues with stuffing these bunnies. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to a smaller set of scissors. And I'm going to pull this apart and just make a little notch. And then I'm going to just cut this slash open just on the one side between those 2 dots. Like so. Okay. And the next step on this one is I've included 3 sizes of the bunny rabbit. So each size does have a different length that you're going to be boxing in the pattern. So for this one, I find 1 inch is a nice distance. So then I'm going to take this and open it up. Okay, so I'm feeling to make sure that this seam along here is lined up with this one. And that feels pretty good. And we're going to go ahead and pin it. So now I've got my mark here. And so I'm basically going to be sewing a straight line across here. If you need to, you can draw that in. I'm just going to eyeball it at the machine. I'm going to do the same on this side. So I'm going to pull this open. So essentially you're creating like a bit of a box at the bottom. Make sure your seam's nicely lined up. And then pin it. So that'll help this bunny stand nicely. So now I'm just going to go back to the machine and I'm going to do 2 straight sewing lines along where those tick marks are. All right, so this is where we're at right now. I've sewn these lines. You can cut these, but they're just going to be underneath the rice stuffing anyways. I'm just going to not bother spending my time to trim that. So now I'm carefully going to turn this right side out. So there's my opening. Do your best to not make that opening bigger. because the way that it is, it nicely hides behind that bunny ear. So just gently flip it the other way around. Okay, and you can just use, you don't need to get any special tool out. You can pretty much just use your finger to really pull this top nose area out. And then down here, I just like to pull out my box. There you go. All right. So we've got kind of that going on at the bottom of this guy. The next step is I like, for this, it seems like a lot, but I'm going to use a full cup of rice. You can probably get away with 3/4. So I've got my cup of rice there, my funnel, and I'm just going to go into this opening and fill it up. And I'm just going to tap it a bit to make sure that it all is at the bottom. Okay, make sure that's all nicely pulled out. And the next step is to stuff this. So again, this works really well if you stuff it with fabric remnants or scraps that are from knits, because they're so soft that you're not going to have any lumps showing through. I'm just looking to see if I have any up here, but I don't. So I am going to go ahead and use some sheep wool that I have flying around. Another option. So I'm just actually going to go into this opening and start to firmly stuff them just little bits at a time. You can use polyfill. You know me, I try to keep away from it. I find if you are using fabric remnants or scraps from the knits, because we're going to be staining this afterwards with a pretty dark coffee stain, I have not found that the color shows through. So if I stuff this with some black fabric, you can't tell that I did that. Like, I'm pretty sure this one, yeah, this one's done with fabric scraps and you cannot see any of that color coming through. So with this, I just find it nice. You just keep turning it around, keep checking it, make sure that you get, into these nice curves along here, because that's what gives the bunny this bit of character and shape. I like to just stick my finger in there and really pull it down and go around and keep checking it from all the sides to make sure you don't have any gaps or empty areas. Probably the stuffing of this guy takes the longest because you do want to do a good job. Okay, so at this point I've stuffed about halfway up past this first curve fairly firmly. And now is a good time to start to go up and try to get up into that nose area. So for this, you could use your baby finger and get in there, or you can use a stuffing tool. I like my hemostats for this. So I'll just go up in there, taking kind of smaller amounts and just getting that nose nicely rounded out. And at this point, this is so heavily stuffed, I don't have to worry that that rice is going to move around on me and come out. So I can just move this bunny however I need to in order to get a nice amount of stuffing in there. I like to stuff him fairly firm, but again, always check around as you're going that you're getting a nice and even shape as you're working. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with how I've got him stuffed. So remember, this is the back side, and I sometimes will squish it around to try to make sure things are shaped evenly, and then do the same for the front. That looks like it's going to come together well. And so the only thing you want to do along here is just stitch that up. Make sure that you're coming out a little bit from there. You don't want to come too close to this opening and have your stitch pull through. So I'm just going from side to side. You also don't want to go too big because that little ear has got to be able to cover up this opening. And I'm just bringing these in together. Okay, so I'm not overlapping, I'm just bringing them so that that both sides meet in the middle, kind of, to try to maintain that original shape. And if you find that your stuffing's coming out, you can just poke it back in with your needle or stuffing tool. Okay, and do your best, like at these top parts, try not get too much of a crease or a buckle in there. And then now if you want an extra reinforcement, you can work your way back down the ladder and almost end up with like a bit of a cross stitch. I like to do this just as extra reinforcement. And then you know that it's really nicely going to hold together. Okay, it does not have to be perfect because it is going to be hidden. So you can knot off however you're usually knotting off. If I can get this in here, I will. I like to sneak in and try to pull up. There we go. So my stitch is locked. I'm just going to come in through there and cut that off. All right. So before I get too much further with the body, I'm going to come back and get the ears done. So with the ears, again, this is going to be your stitching line. So I'm just going to come around. Okay. And then I like to flip it. You don't have to because afterwards you will be able to tell which is which side, but this is just how I do it. Okay. And then again, I'm going to throw a needle or a pin just in the middle of each of these. And the next step is you're going to sew around, but you're going to leave this bottom is going to stay open for flipping it. So you're going to start there or on that side, go all the way around this line and end there. All right, so you can see that I've sewn all the way around these ears. And so I'm going to actually take a smaller set of scissors. I'm going to cut straight along that bottom. That's the open. And I'm going to go around. Again, I have not found that I need to clip the curves on the ears. So it's one last step that you have to do on this one. Okay, and then you can take turning tubes to flip this out. I'm going to take my hemostats because I actually don't have any turning tubes up here at the moment. They're downstairs. This works just as well. And pull that through. And if you're working on one of the larger bunnies, it's even easier. This is the smallest one that I'm making right now. And I'm just going to go along the edge and really pull that curvature out. And even at the bottom, spread it. Now you can iron this if you want. I find if I just hold my hands down on the cotton for a few moments, it will flatten out enough. Don't worry about the fray down here. We'll cut that off before we go to assemble it to the actual bunny body. Okay, so the two ears are done and they're ready. The next step is you're going to come back to your body. And what I like to do is start off by getting that white paint up into the nose area. Then I let that dry and then we go over it with the coffee stain. So what I have here is it's from Michael's Craft Smart Vanilla. I like a nice kind of an off-white shade to use for this. And I'm just putting some out, honestly, just on an old piece of paper because I don't have an old margin lid or anything out at the moment. And I just have a smallish brush. And I'm going to eyeball this. On the pattern, you'll see I'll give you an indicator on how far down you want to go for each of the heads for a nice look. I'm just going to come in here. And again, remember, this is your front. It's kind of doesn't seem the most intuitive because that's where your messy line is. But just to bear that in mind, I'm trying to create like a bit of a rounded look for this nose. Okay, and then after this, it's gonna dry a bit. I'll just show you. Also gonna go, I like to kind of like roughen up that bottom edge a little bit so some of it's coming down further so it's not like a hard ending of that line. I'll do the same around here. There. That'll be good. Okay, so then now's a good time while this is drying to mix up your coffee stain. And this is going to be a heavier colored stain. You can find the ratio in the pattern instructions. But it's basically instant coffee with hot water and then a good splash of vanilla just to make it smell really good. And then keep in mind that the longer it sits around, like I don't have it in here, but the one I've been working from all week, each day it's gotten a bit darker, and it's going to evaporate as it's hanging around. So just keep that in mind. But the darker, it's going to be a lot darker than say what I do for the Harriets because I want it to be this nice deep brown. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry and then I'll come back. So my paint's pretty dry on here, and I'm just going to show you actually finished one. This is like the largest bunny, and I just finished painting him, and that's his little, well, big nose compared to this one. This is the big kahuna. But you can see the color it ends up becoming. So I've got, again, I don't have that much left in here because it's been from all week, but I'm just going to go through. You can even, for the ears, just pop them right in there and just make sure that it's gotten in that seam area. Okay, and then let that dry. Okay, and when they're drying, I just like to flip so that that one's flipping will go this way and this way so that that inner curve is facing each other, just because the part that's touching that cloth, it's gonna get really it's gonna lose some color. So and if you notice that there's a spot that's not as dark as you want it, just go ahead on in and fix that. And then I'm gonna go the body, and it's pretty straightforward. You're just gonna go around like this. And again, know that when he's drying, I mean, you've got to put him down somehow, so that bottom will end up not being as dark as the rest of him. And I like to use quite a large brush for this. This is an old, I think it's an old watercolor brush I had years ago when I was into watercolor painting for doing big washes. And it's my favorite for this kind of work. Okay, I'm just going to go over that top part. And that's him. So you're going to let him dry really well at this stage. And then when I come back, we're going to put the ears on him. And I'll show you how to needle felt on the cotton tail and put his little whiskers on. Okay, so here I've got my body that's nicely dried and the little ears ready to go. So the first step now is to take your glue gun, and I'm just going to go inside of here and just put a little bit of glue just to hold the front and back together into each of these little ears. And then I'm going to clean up this edge just a little so it's not so rough looking. All right, and then you want to double check that that edge that has more curvature to it is pointing towards the center. And what you're going to do is line this up over top of that mess and underneath where the nose area is, and that'll be the first ear. And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue underneath for at the top. And then I'm going to take this other one, line it up about the same distance from the edge. That looks good. And A little bit of glue there. Okay, and then because this one has that rough area underneath it, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. I don't want it to glue completely down because I like, you know, you can see it kind of flipping up. But if you don't want to make sure that that rough area is invisible, just do it like that, okay? Next up with this guy, we can go ahead and get his little whiskers going. So I'm just taking a small piece of, this is like a jute wire, sorry, it's like a 2-ply jute. And to do this part, I am going to need to make holes in either side of the nose. I'll show you on the sample one. So you see I have holes going through on the back side for those whiskers to come through the nose area. So to make those holes, I start with a smaller needle, well, small for me, and I'm just, again, this will, you have some points on your pattern to follow, but I'm just going to eyeball this. And basically you want, that looks pretty good. So you want it so that this going through is pretty horizontal and level. You don't want to be going at a funny angle. So that looks pretty good. And then I can kind of see where my holes are. Then I need to go back in with something bigger. So I'm going to grab out my big needles. So I'm going to use this one. You need something that's big enough. Actually, I think I might try a size smaller. The trick is you want something big enough that it will make a big enough hole for this to go through, but not so big that it's going to damage everything around. So I'm actually think I'm going to use this needle. So you kind of have to look around, see what you have. Number one is this was a 2-ply, so I'm going to actually go down to a 1-ply. So that'll get actually thinner. And then I'm going to do the best job, and if I can't get it in this needle, I'm going to go a size up. But that's pretty good. Okay. And I'm just going to leave it with a little bit on that side, more on this side, and I'm going to grab needle nose pliers. It always makes this part easier. So making sure that you can see me. All right, so I'm just going to go in here, back through that same hole. And you'll see it's going to be hard to get that through, but hold this side so that you don't end up pulling the whole thing all the way through, because I've done that. Just pull on it, and you should be able to ease that through that hole. And I am sure there are alternate methods of doing this, and if you think of something, let me know. Maybe there's an easier way, but that's what I've been doing. And then before I cut this down, I'm going to take just a little bit of Eileen's tacky glue. I'm sure that I don't need a lot. And I'm just going to take which finger do I want to get messy? I'll just use this finger. And I'm just going to dab it right there around the base so that it doesn't slide around on me. Okay, and I'm just going to let that dry. And once that dry, then we can trim that up. Then the last part that we need to do is the cottontail. So what I've been using for my cottontail is I have these beautiful leftover wool bits that I get from Revolution Wool Company in Wallenstein. And Romy's great, and this is all from her sheep. So this is what I'm going to be using. And I'm going to grab a needle, felting needle. Oh, I've got them over here. So what I like to use for this sort of thing is I think these are 30, yeah, it's a 36 gauge spiral needle, they're called. And I just find they're my favorite felting needle for working with doll hair and for this kind of a thing. I find that the spiral really goes in and can get can form really fast, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You do not need to do it like this. You can, in fact, if you don't have sheep wool, I mean, you could probably use just a cotton ball that you use for makeup removal, something that resembles wool, but I'm going to use the real stuff because I have it. So I'm just going to cut off a piece and get rid of that bit, and I'll just use that later on for some stuffing. And I'm going to mush it around. I think I want a little bit more than that. And when I cut off something like this, I like to keep this because this short little bit of hair makes great trim if you're working on like Santa caps and things. So it's all usable and useful. So I don't like to throw that. So I'll definitely keep picking away at that one as I make bunnies. And eventually I'll have a use for that base part they pulled it off. So I might start with that much. And again, if you don't want to needle felt whatever you're doing, you can also play with glue and get that in place. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and do my best to needle felt this on. I'm going to try to make sure I'm located side to side, centered, and way at the bottom of his little rump. Make sure you're on the correct side that's got the ears as you're doing this. And I'm just going to try to needle felt this in. If this is not for you, you could totally glue it in, but I do like the look it gives. And you can see like it's got this kind of, I don't know, just this neat texture to it. But it does take more time than if I were to go and just glue it in place. But you can make that choice yourself. And the reason why it sounds funny is because remember in behind there, there's the rice that we had. So I'm just going to try to get this edge around. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. And then again, afterwards, if I do this and I feel like it's not feeling like it's on there well enough, then you can go ahead, feel free to add some glue in there so that you know for sure it's not going to come off, okay? Back down here. Make sure that I stay in there. Okay, so to me that looks great. So now at this point, I'm going to come back up because this is pretty dry now. So I'm going to gently pull these apart. Now this jute twine is pretty fine, so I do have to be careful not to break off these whiskers, but I like the fine ones. I think it looks good. If you're concerned about breakage after you cut these, you can probably just spray them with a bit of hairspray or take a bit of tacky glue and kind of tap it through. So I'm just going to trim these up to what I think looks good. I'll give you, in the instructions, I'll give you an idea of how long to do each of the bunnies. And I think that's about it. So there he is. Super cute, super fun to make, and they look good when you got different sizes together. So I hope that you give this tutorial a try. Remember the pattern link is down below. And if you like what you see and you enjoyed making this, please like this video, subscribe to this video. When you subscribe, it doesn't hurt you to subscribe, but it's good for me because it means my videos get shown to more people. So I would really appreciate that. Next up, I'm very excited to show you, I'll give you a little preview. We're gonna get into some more complicated bell making. So this is my Belle Epoque bunny, and I will explain that more in the next couple of weeks when you see me back here. But right now I'm just finalizing some design bits on her, and it's probably going to be a 3-part tutorial on how to make her. So I hope you enjoyed making Cottontail Bunny, and I hope you have a great week.